Traditional firewalls look at things like source IP address, destination IP address, the protocol, or in the case of TCP and UDP, they look at the actual port number as well to identify maybe some higher level application. But for the most part, traditional firewalls are very much centered around looking at the network level information as opposed to the actual application that's generating that information. And I think that tends to lead to a major limitation in their ability to stop more advanced threats. And as a result, there's been a lot of work in being able to advance what firewalls are capable of doing. And in this video, I'll talk a bit about some more advanced capabilities of firewalls today as opposed to more traditional firewalls. So let's start by thinking about, imagine you've got a user here, and he has a bunch of different things he's doing in his enterprise. So maybe he's, what kinds of applications might he be running? Maybe he could be browsing the web, so web browsing. He could be checking his email, and maybe he's using a web-based email program. So really, this is part of web browsing might involve he's checking his email. He might be doing file sharing, and this may not be allowed in his company. Maybe his company's got a policy, but maybe nobody's noticed that he's got a file sharing application, and he's been, sharing music files and other stuff on his work machine. He may also be doing instant messaging, and maybe it's a similar story. Maybe he's not allowed to have a particular instant messaging client running on his system, but he's running one anyway because nobody said anything else to him. Okay, and these are all the different applications that he's running on his network, or really on his computer. And each of these applications generates a certain amount of traffic. Now, what's interesting is that all these applications, and it could be the case, they may all be generating traffic over either port 80 or port 443. And port 80, recall, is the port for HTTP. This is kind of standard web traffic, and port 443 is the port used for HTTPS or SSL traffic. Okay, and this traffic could be communicated, and perhaps it's being communicated, over the internet and to some other server on the other side of the internet. Okay. Now, his firewall, if you look at the traditional firewalls are going to be looking specifically at things like the source and destination IP. They're going to be looking at the port number. And so from the perspective or the purview of the traditional firewall, all of these four applications, they all look the same. There's nothing that really distinguishes them. They really are all focusing on the port, okay, rather than the actual application itself that's running on that port or that's communicating over that port. Okay? And this could be definitely a bit of an issue. And so one thing that advanced firewalls do is they try to identify what particular application is running. So for example, they may be able to do some deeper inspection at this level and say, hey, even though this is all going over port 80, maybe this application happens to be the file sharing application, or maybe it happens to be the instant messaging application. They're able to identify or do kind of application fingerprinting, and as a result, you can now have policies that block at the application level rather than just at the port level. So now you can say, I'll allow web traffic in general, I'll allow port 80 traffic in general, except for when that traffic happens to be file sharing. Or maybe on the flip side, you could say, I'll allow port 80 traffic except for maybe allow it in only these cases and not these other cases. And so you can actually have more granular application level policy. So application level policy. Okay. The next thing is that, and this is kind of going back to our example of this user. When you think about it, what the actual firewall or traditional firewall will see for a user is they'll see an IP address, Internet Protocol address, and that might be something like, this user is located at 1.2.3.4, but they may know nothing of the actual user who is behind that IP address. And it could be the case, like imagine this user happens to be, today he might be in his office, tomorrow he might be in the conference room, right? And he might be doing the same kinds of things, but there's no way to know. With traditional firewalls, they're not designed to really think about things at the user level. They really are designed to think about things at the IP address level. And it will be useful to say, maybe certain users or in certain settings, users are allowed to behave a bit differently. So for example, maybe for a particular set of users who really need to do file sharing for business purposes, maybe for those users, you can allow a very specific set of file sharing applications, but for any other user in the system or any other user in that company, those applications may not be allowed. And so the big thing is that You want to be able to not just look at the IP address, which could change or which could differ based on where the user is located, but you want to actually know who the underlying user is and be able to create policies, and this is maybe user centric policies. So the idea is maybe you can block things based on who the actual user is versus versus where he's actually located, which I think is again a lot more practical. So I'd say the two biggest aspects of kind of more advanced firewall functionality are application level policies and being more application level or application oriented rather, and also being more user oriented rather than being kind of port and IP oriented. Okay, I'm going to stop this video right here and I'll do some additional videos as well where I'll follow up and maybe dig a bit deeper into some other types of advanced firewall functionality. I hope you join me for those. Thanks a lot.